Dr. Herning did such a good job of sharing some personal perspectives. I've worked with older adults for over 40 years. I actually started, but only 2 years into the profession, immediately converted to geriatrics and started in acute care and rehabilitation. Then I was in skilled care facilities, nursing homes, both direct services and consulting for 10 years of my career. I have worked also in home health care, and more recently, most of my work has been in the community and particularly focused on health promotion with older adults. Okay, so, well, I missed the last one there. Applying holistic approaches really fit the individual, I think, is so important because at least we believe that they put people at less risk for injury and allow them full participation in the activities that are meaningful to them. So now Dr. Morley covered a lot about the incidence and the etiology of falls and injuries in older adults. But I think as a reminder, we see that falls are a very frequent occurrence in older adults, that 1 out of 3, age 65 and older, and I'm in that category. So I'm personally very cognizant. We know that injury death is a frequent outcome of falls, and we know that in the year 2007, and this is data from our Center for Disease Control, that over 18,000 older adults died from unintentional fall injuries. And he provided to you also some specific data related to falls in nursing homes. Definitely, these injuries affect the individual's quality of life. Dr. Morley also mentioned the fear of falling that often really is so intimidating. Falls are so intimidating to some older adults that they choose not to participate. We know from the literature and studies, and this citation is also from the Center for Disease Control, that there are a number of modifiable fall risk factors. Muscle weakness, which Dr. Herning really addressed extensively, as well as the gait and balance problems. Poor vision has been mentioned by Dr. Morley, and I will spend some more time on that. Polypharmacy, I think you've heard a bit about how medications and their side effects can contribute, as well as environmental hazards. So these have been found to be, all of these, absolutely contributing to fall risk and, highly detrimental. Then we also know that, especially in facilities, that there's an increased staff burden whenever you've got falls. We know, of course, the increased paperwork, and even if we're moving into e-technology for documentation, there's more documentation no matter what kind you have. Certainly increased care results for residents or any patients who fall. Poor survey results occur. Lawsuits, of course, are a risk. Higher insurance premiums and staff morale. Of course, none of us wants to see individuals fall and injure themselves. Now I'm going to shift a bit and talk about, for many of you this may be a review, but how occupational therapy views the human and what we're about and what we do. So we have this model that focuses on the person and their intrinsic factors, their environment, which includes the natural environment, the built environment, certainly their social and cultural environment, and their economic support. We look at what they do, which we call occupational performance, and to what extent do they participate. So we kind of dissect all of that. Our assessments tend to encompass those various factors, and that's how we view how we can assist this older adult. So specifically, within the realm of the person, who is this person today and who have they been? What is their past life? Also, what is their history of falls? Because who they are today and who they've been, much of their identity, of course, revolves around that, and also their interest in participating in whatever activities may have a lot to do with who they are and whether they're at risk for falls or other injuries. Also, what do they want to do? What are their priorities? And it's also about what do they need to do and what is expected of them. So those are other components. Then the environment, I mentioned on the last slide, what is the context of this older adult, because that can certainly have a bearing on risk factors. And then in terms of our OT intervention, of course, in terms of falls, we look at how we can assist the person to perform the activities that they need and want to do, but will also prevent falls. And of course, this is all about supporting their quality of life, minimizing the kind of care that they're going to need or currently need, and the burden to staff or other caregivers who may be in the home, family members as well. All right, so now some of the resources that have been used for especially environmental assessment, perhaps some of you, all of you may be familiar with these. There's one, these are all developed here in the United States, the Safe at Home, which is a very quick home safety assessment. It has about 72 items to it. It's a very good home-based review of environmental factors and what might be, what kind of modifications might be indicated. And then the SAFER, which is the Safety Assessment of Function and the Environment for Rehabilitation, was developed in the 90s. And it's also, it was developed in 1993, and then it has pretty strong reliability and validity supports for its use. So those are some developed in this country. And then these have all been developed primarily in Australia, but actually they're also really quite good tools. When I've used some of them, especially the Westmead, there are a few minor, very minor cultural differences. So maybe the terminology isn't quite the same for something like a gate if you're dealing with somebody you're seeing in their home. But otherwise, it's really very good, very detailed. And it has very strong reliability and validity statistics as well. I haven't spent as much time using the Home Fast or this SOY FWA home safety checklist, but they're both also very useful tools. Interestingly, and Dr. Herning made quite a point of outcome studies, we need a lot more information on how the environment impacts or, let's say, precipitates falls and injuries. There are not that many studies that have been done about that. So I know I'm working with our students on applied research I tell them we need a lot more studies, and you know, people out in the field, as you are, can be contributors to those studies. If you are interested in being involved, I would encourage you to get in contact with somebody at either that you know or a nearby college or university and inquire, because we have to rely on sometimes a lot of local data collectors for studies. So now to turn to the intrinsic factors that contribute to falls and other injuries. The normal age-related changes that occur, we know, are physiological, cognitive, spiritual, neurobehavioral, and psychological. And especially the neurobehavioral aspect is kind of an emerging area of science. So I think we're going to learn a lot more about how neurological function gets translated into behavior, and in our field we call it neurooccupation, sort of the end product of that interface of the central nervous system and what it is that we do. But we know that those normal age-related changes have all of our systems, of course, moving in decremental changes toward lesser function. And then, of course, we have these specific other intrinsic factors, vision, where we have changes in the lens of the eye, the lens of the eye becomes more opaque and yellows over time, and so you have decreased ability to see a full spectrum of colors the same way as we're younger. The retina requires much more light. We know that for people who are 80, they require as much as 3 times more than a 20-year-old in terms of light. And so anytime I walk into an environment that is darker, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how is this person, if they're older, going to function? Or theaters or restaurants. And I myself, I've noticed changes over time. So I always carry a little pen light with me because you never know when you might need that. Hearing changes are pretty evident to most of us. Our sense of smell, which is often why the older adult thinks the food, especially in long-term care, is really not so hot. Well, it may not be that. You know, it might be a combination of sensory change in taste and smell. And of course, we hope that the food served is reasonably good. Cognition, we know that there are those changes. We know that processing of information is slower as we age, but we actually get better in problem solving. Why do you think that is? Anybody? Why can we problem solve better?
Because we need to change, they need to change what they're doing in order to actually do it. You know, if they're compensating for like they can't get out of the chair, they've got a problem solving, how do I get out of this chair? And that's when they start changing their body mechanics in order to get up.
Take the time more with wisdom.
Okay. Well, I think all of those things contribute, absolutely, the wisdom. You've had so much experience doing things that problem solving, you know, I use this analogy with the files in a computer. We've got more files to draw from, so more resources in terms of problem solving abilities. So we've had an excellent discussion of balance and coordination. We know that all of the internal systems change. Joints, muscles, posture, and strength have also been addressed. And then we also know that acute medical conditions are often more frequent. Most people have some forms of chronic conditions. perhaps deterioration simply from the lack of activity, the sedentary lifestyles that we keep hearing about. And of course, Dr. Morley made a major point about no bed rest. And I think that, lack of activity is what is truly a barrier for a lot of older adults in terms of maintaining their strength and coordination, posture, energy levels. Unsafe behaviors and symptoms. We know that in our older adults that some studies have shown that up to 2/3 may have a form of clinical depression. So I have this picture here sort of depicting, this person may be depressed, becomes alcoholic as a result, or some other kind of substance abuse. And then do you know that the highest incidence of AIDS in this country currently is in a population of people who are age 60 and over? And it's just a matter of lack of knowledge, I think, and just not being informed. So there are some unsafe behaviors and related symptoms. And of course, quite a point was made by Dr. Morley about medication side effects. So now I'd like to turn to environmental factors that can contribute to falls and other injuries, and we call those extrinsic factors. So the typical age-related changes that occur are in social support. We know that as families grow, adult children may move away or not. You may have a very close family unit yet. Some families are very much intact and others are at great distances. Actually, all of my adult children live hours away from me, and one lives halfway around the world. So, you're not going to always have immediate social support. Both the social and economic systems, so their financial status, even their, the whole topic of healthcare reform, pensions, the recession we've been going through, all of those kinds of factors contribute as they're part of the environment. Culture and values. What has been this person's style of living? What are their basic values? Are they from kind of a mainstream culture in the US? Are they from somewhere else originally? Or maybe a very unique culture within the States that's been here, practically forever. But that is very important. The built environment, what kind of physical environment are they living in? Are they accustomed to? And do they really enjoy? And then, of course, the natural environment. Just a quick story about the natural environment. My husband and I were visiting with a couple just a couple of nights ago, and they had, I guess they have a getaway place in Colorado that's at 11,000 feet. Well, they invited their whole family to come, but they couldn't, and over the time they realized they couldn't keep the place because everyone had elevation sickness, and especially the older parent absolutely could not tolerate 11,000 feet, oxygen deprivation. So they had to take her down the mountain and do something, to deal with that. But I include these pictures because we have such a wide variety of possibilities that people either are currently living in or have come from and really value. This one is pretty upscale, upper middle class, probably typical. This one here, have you heard of the urban homestead movement? Well, anyway, I found this in the urban homestead, but people who love growing things and so forth often surround their place with all kinds of plantings. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But also another part of this are our highway, roads, and streets. I know that we were following directions to come here this morning, and I was so pleased that the directions were so clear. But, you know, you start making all these turns. If you're not familiar with the place, you start turning. You make a, you use the exit, then you turn left, and then you're to look for 1, 2, or 3 different other turns. Well, what about the signage? The signage isn't always very clear. And our older adults whose cognition may be slowed down or their vision may not be quite as good, all of these things then present certain kinds of barriers. So I always look at the whole environment, and one of the things that I've marveled at over the years is how Lambert International Airport, when you're trying to access the airport, you have to make all these quick decisions. And every time I've done that, I've thought, what about that older person who's slower, who's still trying to function, is capable of driving, isn't a danger on the road, but still, you have to do all these things. So I think I challenge everyone here to please go back. If you're in a residential setting, look at your environment and look at the approach. You know, how user-friendly is it for our older adults? For people who are in home care or other similar instances, it's the same kind of thing. We can look at all of these and say, how easy is it for our elders to navigate? What about landscaping? So up here we've got, it's very clear where the sidewalk is, where the entrance is. Here, not so clear with all these plantings. They may be wonderfully productive, but what about the person with ambulatory challenges? Here's a pretty hefty looking curb. This looks like steps with a railing, but if you've got vision problems and so forth, it may not be that easy to navigate. So that's sidewalks and steps, building entrances, any building entrance. One thing here that I find fascinating is how we have so many doors that are so heavy. I see some of you have noticed that too. I notice that some of the doors I encounter, and I think of myself as reasonably strong for my age. You know, I'm not a bodybuilder, but still, but my gosh, to push or pull, many of these doors are just so challenging for people. Okay, and then the interior, the lighting, the flooring, I'm going to show examples and pictures, the choice of colors, our hallways and our stairways, which have been mentioned before. Okay. Also, the entrance to the individual's room or apartment, whatever that might be. If somebody's carrying packages or bags of groceries or whatever the case is there any place near that entrance for them to set the things down so that they can then insert their key in the lock, kind of thing? Or are they still juggling, or do they have to put it down and then try to get their key into the lock and then pick them up again? The design of the room is certainly another factor in functionality, and of course the type of furniture. So some of the safety considerations, you know, we would really like to see railings on both sides of stairways. They don't always happen, but especially if you've got people who've had strokes and they need a railing, then certainly both sides would be indicated, it would seem. doors, I've mentioned some of that. Making sure also that the doorways are wide enough. In institutions, this isn't, you have codes and standards that you have to comply with. In homes, however, I've worked with people who had to go into their bathroom sideways with their walker because their doorway wasn't wide enough for the walker. So we look at all of those and see if there are any modifications that could be recommended without enormous cost. Cabinets. Are cabinets reachable for the individual? And this, this applies to any setting, whether it's the home or it's the nursing home. What about reach? Because when a person is reaching, and you just had the functional reach test mentioned, if they're overreaching, of course, that's putting them at risk for a potential fall. Also, if they have things tucked away in the back and they have no way of accessing them, that's yet another risk factor. The pull-out shelves and drawers are much more functional for individuals if they can be afforded. Appliances, again, the notion of reach. Are the controls for appliances both easy to reach and easy to read? Because you can have errors made in terms of judgment if someone misinterprets, let's say, a control. They think it's on low and it's really on high. So I always think of beyond falls, let's think about any injuries, kind of thing. Fire and carbon dioxide detectors, that issue is probably more of a home care kind of thought, but I have been in home environments where the air quality was so poor that after 1 hour of assessment and my initial interview with the person and developing a plan of care, I left with a headache. And I think we have to think broadly about the environment. In nursing homes, of course, you're very accountable. But when we're dealing with people in other environments, we should take in, what are all the factors impacting their function? If it gives me a headache, at the time this happened, I was in my mid-40s and I'm 20 years older. What is it doing for that older adult? Is it affecting them, putting them at additional risk for falls or other injuries? The toxic substances, especially, they can spill. If somebody leaves something out and open, it could be a gas can in a garage. Sometimes people store things there. Or down in a basement level where you've got a puddle of something on the floor. It might be toxic or not, but it could be a false slip hazard. The equipment that the person needs to use, is it safe? Is it light enough for them to manage without, causing either bodily, injury? It could be a fall or some other kind of injury. And then there are personal care items. Again, this notion of can they easily access what's important? So in a nursing home, is there a bedside table or cabinet, I should say, with a drawer that's easily accessed from where they are in the bed, if that's how they use it, or if they're ambulatory or they're in a wheelchair, still the notion of easy reach is important. I go into, I've been in a lot of nursing home facilities, and then of course homes too, where that may or may not be the case. The person can't easily reach, and so there again, they're putting themselves at risk for falls. So the poor lighting, I've mentioned, we know that task lighting is best for older adults, so lighting that's very close and intense, so the high intensity bulbs and lamps for reading activities, if they're doing needlework or anything of that sort. Clutter has been mentioned before. We know that contributes to falls. Uneven floors. I know when I'm with my mother, who's 92, and she has macular degeneration, and her ambulation is okay, it's not great. She really should. I'm always encouraging the chair exercises and the other exercises. She lives in a continuum of care community, but I'm always coaching her on, whenever we're together and moving across spaces, about the floor levels and what have you. But if you've got uneven floors, or let's say the curbs that they're stepping off of are not highlighted, not marked, and they're not aware of safe paths, these are absolutely hazards. Wet areas have been mentioned. The type of furniture, and I've got some examples and pictures of that. What about the bed wheels? Are they in good repair? So that, and in terms of locks, bed wheel locks. The wheelchair brakes, are they in good working order? Are there missing equipment parts that could put someone at risk? Footwear, of course. I think, years ago I thought, I can't be teaching about falls prevention and then wear shoes that put me at risk, especially once I passed 60. So I know I'm personally cognizant, and we do have to respect the right of choice to some extent, but I think we certainly have a responsibility as professionals to encourage safe footwear for these older adults. Their clothing, if they've got very complicated clothing and they stand to put something on, probably, they may not stand so much, but they might, then that in itself, the dual tasking issue can put them at risk. So let's work at encouraging, if style is important to them, encourage simplified garments in terms of ease of putting on and taking off. And I've already talked about personal items that are not easily accessible. Things that are up also on shelves that the individual can't reach easily, but they need to use on a regular basis. We should try to rethink that. Okay, so I've talked about, I think mostly all of these, but this is mostly to show the variety of environments from highly urban. We're dealing with people who live in high-rises sometimes, and they need to be able to use an elevator and access maybe public transportation. We deal with people living in more, well, this is part of the homestead movement, but note the pathway. It's not very easy to see. It's very likely to be uneven. It doesn't look paved. And then here's a woman using a walker, right next to some steps. I don't know if she can manage those steps very well or not. So these environmental design features and obstacles absolutely do make a difference. Okay, what about what people do? What is it that people do that can additionally put them at risk? Now, this is just a synopsis of how we think of activity participation in OT. Of course, the basic ADLs, but then the instrumental activities of daily living. Those who are not in, let's say, any kind of institutional environment or even in a retirement community of care. may still be negotiating some of the fundamental things like managing their finances, using transportation, having to do shopping, and so on. What about education? Some people really like classes. They like the opportunity to attend various events. And maybe in your facility, you have some of those available. Work or volunteering. We are seeing an increasing number of older adults continuing to work for a wide variety of reasons. Leisure activities, we often, I think, sort of, well, we think of leisure as associated closely with being an older adult and how we should have a lot of free time. Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but most of us should have some leisure time. And then to what extent are they involved socially, and is spirituality an important part of their life? So we call activities, any activity, occupation, and how they perform in whatever activities. And of course, I've got Dr. Morley here with his dancing. And, but you know, we have such a wide variety of activities that people both want to engage in and do. Okay, so we know these are supported in the literature, these high-risk locations and activities, getting into and out of a bathtub or shower. That's kind of common sense, but of course we know that's true. Standing at the sink, and this comes as a surprise to some people, but if we think about it, the business of standing and then the environmental aspect of water and what we're doing with that, and people lose their balance, they may slip, and so forth. Okay, getting out of bed. Most people here would fully appreciate that. And then, you know, usually the guide is as people are getting out of bed to take just a few seconds before they rise. So, you know, now that I'm in that category, I'm getting up in the middle of the night, I pause because I think, you know, even though I don't know of a risk factor, why not be careful? Rising from a chair, you had a number of examples. Dr. Herning shared the get up and go test, but high risk place. Descending stairs, and you know, dealing with stairs, if we at least highlight that, the best is to highlight every step level. And if not that, at least the top and the bottom one. And the bottom and the top should be contrasting with the rest of the environment. So sometimes it's a matter of affordability. Okay. And then looking up to reach something on a shelf. So it's the matter of looking up, you know, the kyphosis that often occurs with aging, and the person is already kyphotic. They're looking up, they're reaching, and then they lose their balance and go backwards. And people living at home over the age of 60, of course, should not be standing on chairs. But that may not even be advised for younger people either, because I was on a project in Greece in the mid-90s, and it was actually a convent, and the average age of the person in this convent was 35, and they do all kinds of things. Well, I had given this talk about safety and body mechanics, and while they were doing all the activities they do, and I got an email the very next week saying that one of the nuns had fallen off of a chair, broken her arm, and they reminded her that I said don't stand on chairs, but anyway, whatever. So I'm of the belief that maybe at any age we shouldn't be standing on chairs, but using the safety ladders, you know. Okay, what about the specific design features? What do we like to see in those? We want to in the physical environment, avoid shadows where people are mobilizing, either ambulating or, you know, using a walker, wheelchair, what have you, both outside and inside. Signs, labels, and name tags. Large, simple fonts and contrast. Now, I have to say, in working in the skilled care facilities that I did, I know that changes can't be made overnight often. Affordability is a big issue. But I was so pleased to see that over the course of 10 years in one facility, they changed the name tags, and it made a dramatic difference in the, you know, the ability to see the person's name. The residents were more interactive. Now, I don't know if it impacted falls, but anyway, it really made a difference. So for signs, though, too, you know, where people can, if there's a lot of contrast to the lettering and the background, it's much easier for wayfinding. And people may not wander trying to find something and then fall if it's clear. Okay, and of course, clutter around signs or anywhere isn't indicated. So filtered background natural lighting is a good thing. Indirect overhead lighting instead of really direct lighting that glares. Now this is good, this is indirect overhead. Seating at table height, providing that for different activities that are indicated. And then I mentioned before easy reach, and that's rather fundamental. So here's an example of filtered background natural lighting. There's indirect overhead lighting and activity seated. I don't know if you have cooking groups or that kind of thing going on in your facility, but that's you know, certainly appropriate for many groups. Okay, so we also try to avoid pools of light, because notice this. This person walks in, and the recovery of the eye, the lens of the eye trying to accommodate for differences in lighting, it's serious. It's much slower as we age. And so going from any dark area into bright light, like inside to outside on a bright sunny day, or vice versa, they need more time to make that transition because of the lens of the eye doesn't accommodate as quickly. And the same is true for pools of light, same effect. And then lighting heights. We need to look at our environment in terms of what will work both for the ambulatory and the person in the wheelchair. So that in this case, this person is squinting or turning away because the light is fine for somebody who's ambulating, but it comes right into their direct line of vision in this example. So, and then the shadows caused by too much overhead lighting. Okay, so also the height and placement of bulletin boards and signs, again, so that I always, when I go into a facility, I've done a fair amount of consulting, I look at it from both a wheelchair level as well as a standing level, and if I can't see from both of those levels, then I recommend a change so it's more visible. So we say the mid to lower range of vision. So you've got the ambulatory, the person maybe with kyphosis who's assisting somebody in a chair. Everyone is able to see, and they're not going to get confused or distracted and fall or what have you. Now I put this in here to sort of simulate somebody with some age-related changes. This would be primarily sort of like a cataract, very fuzzy viewing. And if we've got physical environments that are very busy with let's say, narrow paths between tables, chairs, and so on, it makes it really hard to see. These are all from real settings in the St. Louis area where, I took a lot of different pictures of examples of what I thought were not good. These are all senior settings, all right? So note how somebody who was using a wheelchair really wouldn't be able to see very well people back here. And, I know that it's very fashionable today, these higher stools. Well, they get my veto for older adults because I am so short. When I try to get up on one of those, I probably sometime might fall, It's just not very safe. So pathways, note the pathway here is so narrow between the edge of this counter and then where this chair is. And then the lighting is really dim. So again, if you go into your setting with sort of critical eyes, this is the same setting. This is actually a group of senior apartments in St. Louis. What do you notice here that it's a problem based on what I've said? Dim lighting, low lighting, okay. Note this, somebody in a wheelchair, you cannot tell. There is a receptionist sitting here, but you would never know it, okay? Okay. Same setting. They've done a great job with contrasts of handrails and even the bench, but they've got all of these names on sort of like a very nice plexiglass, but a person, an older adult with vision problems, wouldn't even be able to discern that. And then, this doesn't show up too badly, but the highly polished floor is really contraindicated because of the glare-producing potential. Now, this is another part of the same facility. I think this is a better example of design because they've got these louvered blinds that can be turned to regulate the amount of light. So if it's a bright sunny day, you still have your light, but you're not going to blind the older adults in there. And then their furniture, well, I guess first of all, note carpeting is very low pile. So it's easy to navigate on with wheelchair, walker, canes, what have you. Also notice this is a matte finish on the table. We don't recommend highly polished surfaces of any kind because it produces a lot of glare for that older adult. Okay. And here, this is the same setting, a different room. Again, the table is good size. Notice the arms on the chairs. Hopefully, if you're in facilities or if you're dealing with older adults in their homes, they will most likely benefit most from having those kinds of chairs. Now here again, the same facility, but a bizarre arrangement in my mind. They've got shelves immediately above these chairs. Now, all I can say is it's a good thing I'm short, because if I were sitting there, I could probably get up without hitting my head and falling. But a taller person getting up under those shelves, I don't know who thought of this way to arrange the furniture. Now this is really quite a good example. There's not too much polish here, so you don't have the glare, which is excellent. You've got the potential for task lighting here. You've got good armrests on these chairs. You've got great contrast of the baseboards and the floor, because visually that can become very confusing to people with low vision problems. they can run into the wall or stub their toe and fall or what have you. And then the railings on both sides are very tastefully integrated into the overall design. So this one I would give high marks. Okay, now this is a residential setting and you know, a single bed. I question the height of this next to the bed. You know, this person, when they're dropping off to sleep, unless this is a touch kind of base, they're going to have a hard time reaching that lamp. So that, you know, we need to think about those things. This is another, like a retirement center. The lighting is fairly good, except nothing next to the bed. So, you know, they should have a telephone, a flashlight, a light, nothing next to the bed. And look at the chairs. Now, maybe they don't sit in those, they're just there for design. But if they are sitting, they may need something with armrests. Okay. And so this is just kind of an overall summary. Leg strength and balance has truly been emphasized. Regular medication reviews for people wherever they live. Annual vision checks, including their glasses. Reducing tripping hazards, any clutter, and certainly the lighting should be closely examined. And then, of course, the calcium and vitamin D has been emphasized. And then, so that the individual can pursue the activities that are really important to them, that they need to do. Working at pacing their day and week so they can fit in what is manageable and not be in such a rush they start tripping and falling and what have you. Conserving their energy for the activities that are really important to them. And I had several examples of stressing the easy reach principle, making things within easy reach, and of course remaining active in what is meaningful to them. And you know, I really like walking and other like dancing and that sort of thing. And I've always worked with physical therapists all my professional life, but if somebody gave me a set of exercises, it would totally bore me. So I think we have to be creative in finding what is going to work for that person, because I know I want to be physically fit if I can be. So, you know, I would look to my physical therapist to help me figure this out, because I would want to do that.